Jonathan Panikoff is my guest, director of the Middle East Security Initiative at the Atlantic Council's Middle East program. He himself also a former U.S. intelligence officer. Jonathan, thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Can you make sense of the president's remarks, talking about thinking outside the box? That's certainly what Netanyahu has dubbed it. Your read.
Well, I think this is so far outside the box, I'm not sure you can actually see it in the background. The reality is the U.S. would have to commit, frankly, tens of thousands of troops and be willing to spend decades to enable the type of reconstruction that the president was talking about unilaterally. And I think for many in the U.S. and many in the region, it's going to harken everybody's minds back to, frankly, what has been ultimately failed nation-state building in Iraq and Afghanistan. I do think that the president's goal ultimately was to try and figure out a way to move beyond the traditional, because Israel and our Arab allies, Europeans, have been struggling to figure out who provides security, who provides reconstruction. There's still 16 months into the war, no plan for the next day in Gaza. I think you're trying to shake up the system, but I'm not sure that this is frankly practical in any meaningful way.
You know, we're showing footage of what Gaza looks like right now, certainly large swaths of it all but destroyed. And the president, perhaps at face value, saying, well, people can't live in this kind of situation here. So, even if they were to move temporarily while Gaza gets rebuilt, then they could come back. I mean, perhaps that's what he was suggesting. The White House press secretary, Caroline Levitt, basically saying, look, the president is approaching this from a humanitarian point of view as well. But again, U.S. allies saying this is a non-starter. We're not, there's just no way that we're going to take 2 million Palestinians. Say nothing of the fact that a lot of the Palestinians, as you could appreciate, Jonathan, I would say no doubt a vast majority, would have no interest in that either.
I think that's absolutely right. Look, I think at face value, and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz also commented on this, there is truth. It is incredibly almost impossible conditions to live in. The amount of aid that's going to be required is astronomical. If you speak to experts on the ground and those who have dealt with reconstruction, they'll tell you it's going to take at least 2 years before you could even begin meaningful reconstruction to clear all of the rubble, all of the debris. But there's a long history here that I think is also important. The history that goes back to 1948, Palestinian, what they call the Nakba, displacement from Israel, of present-day Israel. And so the idea that Palestinians are going to pick up and leave, I just think is antithetical to the historical narratives that have driven them for so long. I also think the reality is the Jordanians and the Egyptians, there's a real risk that if they accepted Palestinian refugees, it would undermine their own stability domestically. Much of the Jordanian population has Palestinian origins. And if you were to accept them, then it would be almost a wink and a nod and be viewed by some of those populations that Amman and Cairo are giving up on the hope of a Palestinian state and backing a desire by the U.S. or by Israel to have the Palestinians, frankly, not have their own independent sovereign state, which is not what Netanyahu said. He actually was very cautious in his reaction to this himself.
Hey, just before we go, I've got about 30 seconds, but do you think that based on the close relationship between Trump and Netanyahu, do you believe that under this White House, a two-state solution between Israel and the Palestinians is dead for now?
I don't think it's dead for now. I think it's important to remember the relationship between Netanyahu and Trump has ebbed and flowed quite a bit. It was terrible at the end of the first term. I think the question is going to be whether other Arab states and whether the Palestinians are ready and willing to engage. There is going to have to be some creativity that goes beyond the traditional two-state solution ideas that have been put out there for years. I think Trump might be in a position to help with that, but it's probably not going to start with the proposal he gave last night.
Jonathan Panikoff joining us. He's with the Atlantic Council's Middle East program, former U.S. intelligence officer, joining us from Washington, D.C. today. Jonathan, great conversation. Thank you for taking time for us up here in Canada.